Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to All Heart All Soul with Sock Monkey Mike. Yes, I actually have a name for this podcast, so this is this is a brand new start to the new year. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I have a very special guest for again, this is not a first episode. It's more just of a rebrand. Just a passionate conversation with passionate people in what they're doing right now in their career field. This person in particular is a world renowned podcaster, DJ. He also has a lot of stuff going on when it comes to Afterbuzz TV, where he does the AEW post show, where he reviews Dynamite along with his co-host every single week. And you know, this man, it's pretty interesting right here in my notes right here that I have. Born and raised in Tacoma, Washington, and you know, going into this world of broadcasting and also having the love for professional wrestling, I really see myself in this individual as well. So I really do appreciate him taking his time for this new rebrand. So ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to a DJ, podcaster, broadcaster, the Jack Farmer. How are you? Oh
man, thank you so much. I love that intro. I need to have you intro me everywhere now. This is fantastic. I feel like $1,000,000. I feel like I could take on the world. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm glad to chat with you. I like the new name. I like that you're adding it on. I think it's going to be just another step in you getting to that next level.
Well, I do appreciate it, my friend. This change needed to happen because I really wanted these interviews to be more than just interviews on a regular podcast. Like, oh, here's another podcast. It's more of a passionate conversation with passionate people of what they do, whether that's broadcasting, professional wrestling, music, art, whatever that passion is. I always just like to get that conversation with them and share just how much they love what they do.
Yeah, and I think wrestling is one of those things that people who are fans of it are very passionate about it. I think that's why you get such a Twitter storm whenever something happens on the WWE or AEW or whatever the wrestling company may be, because people care so much about wrestling. And so as a wrestling podcaster and everything, I think that that's a perfect alley for you.
Well, I do appreciate it, my friend. One thing I do want to mention is that, again, people know you as, of course, a part of Afterbuzz TV, doing a little bit of dabbling in Thunder Studios, but also a DJ. I do want to talk about that for a little bit. Where did that passion come from that made you want to say, I want to do DJ and I really want to make these events that I am doing so unique?
Yeah, the DJing is actually what sort of got me to the dance, so to speak. And it was funny is I didn't actually plan on being a DJ. I was going to school to learn to make video games, and it was I needed a job to help pay the bills while I was going to school, and there was a DJ company that needed someone to work in the warehouse, and so I was like, that sounds great, I can do that. And while I was there, they were like, Jack, you're good at talking to people. Why don't you help us book events and work in the office? And I was like, cool, I'll do that. And then eventually I was like, you know what? These DJs always come back with these fun stories of events they did. Maybe I should give that a whirl. And so I went to some events with them and I had the time of my life and they taught me how to DJ and I've been doing it ever since. And obviously 2020 has been a little different, but outside of that, it's just been such a fun time getting to go to these events and basically celebrate with people and have the best day of their lives with them. And every single weekend, you know, it's great. And so that was something that I didn't think I was going to love, but I do. And it also gave me the skill set to move into all the other different ventures.
Yeah, and what I absolutely love too is the fact that each DJ, whether that's at a wedding, whether that's at any event, has a very unique, different playlist. That's what makes them stand out. Is there a specific playlist for you that whenever you go to a wedding, an event in general, that there's a specific list of songs that are like, this is what's going to get the party rocking?
Yeah, there's definitely certain songs that are always going to work. I think as a DJ, it's my job to always sort of look at the crowd and see who's there, especially because I do a lot of weddings and corporate events. And so you get a lot of different groups there as opposed to, you know, if you're at a club, certain clubs get the same group of people every night, or at least the people who are into the same types of music or the same type of night. But with weddings and corporate events, it's different every time. So you got to look at who's there, read the room, and make sure you're playing to them. Obviously, if it's a bunch of 20-year-olds and I play something from the 70s, they're going to go, what is this? You know, as opposed to if I'm in a room filled with people who are in their late 40s, they're going to vibe out to something different than 20-year-olds are, you know? One of my favorite songs, though, to start the night off with, it's an old one. It's a throwback, but I don't care. I love it, so I play it for me, and that's September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think it's just a cool groove. It's nice and easy to get up and dance to, but I like everything. That's one of the reasons why I think I DJ, is because, honestly, man, I like all genres, all music, new stuff, old stuff, everything. I think I can just find where different music works, and so I like it all. As cliche as that sounds for a DJ to say.
I mean, for me, I love 70s music, especially as a 21-year-old kid myself. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just how I am. Yeah. But I understand that. I mean, you have to read the room. You have to really kind of feel what music is going to really set the mood for that event. I mean, when you look at people that are my age, in the 20 range or early 30s, you really see a lot of EDM. You really see a lot of, like, of course, rap, maybe a little bit of metal, if depending on what kind of party you're going to. Yeah. So it's really interesting of how today's generation really kind of applies to different types of music.
Well, I think, with music, what's really made it interesting as it's changed over the years is it's become easier to make songs and music on your own, as opposed to needing groups of people. You know, you go back to the 70s, for instance, and speaking of Earth, Wind, and Fire, they were a massive band with singers and trumpet players and guitar players and drummers and all these people, where today, because you do it all on a laptop, it's easy for you by yourself to sit down and put together a song. And if you're comfortable with singing, you can sing, you can leave the singing out of it. There's just lots of tools to do it on your own. And I think it's empowering, it's cool. So I love that. But I think there's also something about the energy that gets lost a little bit in having a room full of people in a studio or on a stage, all just jamming out together and playing music and vibing together. I think that's the big difference between music of today and of yesterday.
And what I absolutely love about the music of yesterday, of course, because I'm an old soul in a little millennial's body, is the fact that the type of the feel for that music, especially back then compared to now. I mean, of course, there is some music. I do grant it that there's some music of today that I do get a little bit of a vibe to. It's that old classic rock. It's that, like you mentioned before, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I could even go and say Kansas is part of one of them. Boston. just that classic rock type of feel that really reminisces with an individual.
Right. Those are all kind of Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack bands kind of vibe, which, by the way, great soundtracks, those two. But yeah, there's something about, I think, and look, I don't want to sound like the old guy that's like, music today isn't. I think there's tons of great music today. But I'm just saying, I think there's something about the older music where, because so many people were a part of it, I think there's a part of it that makes it less individualistic, but also something that gives it, like I said, like a community energy. Because even back in the day, when you think about all the producers and sound engineers and all the people that touched a song before it got out to the world, where now with SoundCloud, you know, and different websites, I could literally put together a song this afternoon, release it, and put it up on Spotify. Whether or not it does good, who knows? But you don't really need necessarily as many people to touch it, which means it's more individualistic, which is cool. But like I said, there's that sort of sense of community and energy that I think just that works when people work together, you know?
And what I'm actually curious to know too, since you brought that up, is, you know, you see a lot of artists today using technology such as SoundCloud, such as, you know, Odyssey, you know, programming such as GarageBand, that are making music and putting them out on those, you know, small streaming platforms that eventually make it to Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever the case may be. So do you feel like that now is the best time, whether that's music, professional wrestling, broadcasting, to put out content? Or do you think it's a bad time because everybody's doing that, everybody's putting out the same thing?
It's yes and no. I think that if it's something you want to do, then 100% you should be doing it. If it's something that someone does just for the sake of, you know, getting recognized or trying to make $1 million or becoming famous or whatever the case is, then no, don't waste your time. But if you love music and you want to try it, yeah, I mean, why not? Everything's shut down. Might as well learn an instrument. Might as well learn to try to put a song together, learn a new program, or create a show. If that's something you love, if you're willing to do it for free, then I think, yes, do it. But if you're like, hey, I want to be Joe Rogan in the next, 6 months, then no, you're probably not going to happen because of that competition out there. But yeah, if you love something now, I think more than ever, that's one of the positives of 2020 is because everything's shut down so much, it has given us a chance to stop and say, well, what do you love? Work on that. Do that. So yeah, I'd say if you love it, go for it. If you don't waste your time.
And that's a great game plan, because a lot of the times people are like, oh, I'm stuck at home. I don't have the best internet. I don't have the best equipment, or any equipment for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have all the best resources in the world. Well, you still have your smartphone. You still have you still have resources out there for you to produce something that could turn into more than that later on.
Yeah, and you make a great point about the cell phone. And you can, if you have a phone, you can put together a show. And I know a lot of people want it to be perfect the first time through, but you've done shows, so no right. matter how much prep you do and no matter how much you get ready for that first show, you will never be as happy with it down the road. You may think today, like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good first episode. But when you look back on it a year later, you're going to go, ugh, I can't believe I did that. Or you're going to, you know what I mean? Like, it's never going to be perfect. So if you have a phone and you want to try it, just record it, put it up, see how it does. See how you feel about it, and then do it again, and then do it again, especially with shows, especially if we're talking about podcasts and things. You got to just keep on doing them. That's the biggest thing, is I think a lot of times people will do 10 episodes and then say, how come I'm not getting 100 million downloads? You got to expect that you're not going to get 1 million views day one.
Mm-hmm. It's just that mentality, because I have a lot of friends that are out there producing content and they're saying, man, I only got 1 view, if that, and it's not taking off as I had hoped. I've been doing this personally for over 7 years. So for the fact that, I had those beginnings and worked hard, networked, just talking to people, being nice to people, and to really gaining a connection with not just the people that I network with, but also with the people that are like, man, I love what you do, and people that are from higher ups that are like, man, I love what you do. I'm like, wait a minute, you know what I do? So just knowing that I came from those humble beginnings, and even now, if I don't get the 20 views that I hope to get, it's still great to know that people are watching, and those specific people that you want to watch are watching, however that case may be.
Right. And it's not always, I mean, we have to be realistic to what people's viewing patterns are as well. So like, the truth is, a lot of people aren't going to watch shows every single week or whatever, but you never know when someone's going to go back and check something out, or something along those lines. And a lot of times as you're doing these, your interviews are better now than they were 7 years ago, but you wouldn't be doing them the way you are today if you didn't start 7 years ago and learning those skills and sharpening those tools. And that's the thing I think a lot of people with the short-term game plan miss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's, once again, it's just that goal. You don't see, a lot of people don't see those goals 10 years from now, what they're going to achieve. They always say, I want to achieve those goals now. I want to get 1 million followers on Instagram with 500,000 likes per photo. And they're not like, well, wait a minute, I only have 30 followers on Instagram and I'm only getting about 5 likes at best. So they really don't see the process that comes with it. I always say, from this world famous wrestler, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Mike Kanellis, aka Mike Bennett.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, he always has this saying of process over outcome. And that to me has really stuck with me, because I know it's process over outcome. It's always about that process of nonstop work ethic of editing, and to network, and to reach out to people, to ask more questions, to come up with more questions, do the research, do the transcripts, whatever the case may be. Just remember that process before you bask in the glory of 1 million followers or whatever.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that saying, by the way. That's amazing, and it's so true too. And especially as we talk about you know, how fast things grow and all these things. It reminds me of something that I once heard about, like working out, and it's if you work out every day, you will get stronger. You may not get stronger as fast as you'd like. You may not look the way you think, but if you're working out every single day, it will eventually work. You just have to continue to do it and do it and do it and do it and not look at what each daily result is. And so I guess the same point you just made is it's the process and it's not always fun. I think that's the other thing too, is that people miss out, is there is work to it. You know, it's not fun going through as the host and downloading the audio and then going into Anchor and then uploading the audio or whatever the case may be. Or, you know, there's a lot of not fun parts, but you got to get used to those. You know, I always say, like, LeBron James loves winning championships, but I bet he doesn't love waking up early to shoot free throws every single morning to become a better basketball player. You know what I mean? You've got to learn to embrace the stuff that isn't fun so you can enjoy the fun stuff when it does come up.
And what I also love is, like you said about LeBron James, and also rest in peace as well, Kobe Bryant's mentality of really putting in the extra work when you really don't need to, because it makes you better. It makes you keep getting better. And of course, you can always be satisfied with one thing, but if you never keep going and trying and to improve yourself even more and more, there's no point.
Yeah, it reminds me of something my grandpa said years ago when I was doing track and cross country. I was really big into like running, and it was Thanksgiving, and he was like, "Hey, Jack, did you go for a jog today?" And I was like, "No, I took it off because it's Thanksgiving." And he said, "Well, your competition went for a jog today." And it always stuck with me. And I was like, "Grandpa, what a jerk. Way to ruin Thanksgiving." But he made a good point. And that is that, you know, you've got to do those things you don't want to do if you want to be successful.
Yep. And again, it's just that mentality of just keeping going and to push yourself even farther. Like for you, for example, you have so much to do, you know, with your work, and you just keep pushing and keep putting out that extra content out there, whether that's your multiple podcasts, which you all could subscribe to down in the link in the description as well. And also check out his Afterbuzz TV work. You know, and of course you know, you are dabbling a little bit in Thunder Studios, which we will get to in a bit. But it's just the fact that you are just continuously doing all these separate projects. You are continuously putting in that hard work that really just stands out to a lot of aspiring broadcasters out there, just like myself.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's something that, yeah, starting with Afterbuzz TV, you know, like a lot of people, I started off with watching it, and then I was fortunate to have a friend, Flobo, who was working there, and I was like, eventually, basically, he said, "Jack, why don't you come by and try to be a part of the team here?" And you know, you go and you audition and you try out, and you got to do a whole bunch of stuff before you actually get on a show there. Going back to that whole idea of doing the stuff you don't want to do to get to the stuff you do want to do. And at first it was something that was kind of fun. I was a DJ, so I was just like, maybe this will help me learn to be better on a microphone. Maybe this will help me learn to think on my feet or host different types of events down the road. But then, of course, I love pro wrestling. Like, I've always loved pro wrestling my whole life. And so I just had so much fun doing that. And then, so it was like, I wanted to do more stuff along those lines. And so then, of course, Afterbuzz, because of COVID, has taken a bit of a hiatus. I was like, I'm going to start doing my own shows. My buddies Flobo started doing their shows, and then other opportunities come up. And I don't like to sit around and do nothing. Like, I like to be active. I want to work on things. And so as this whole shutdown, I say shutdown in quotes because I feel like I'm working more now than I did when everything was open. Yeah, you got to take advantage of it and keep going. And I love the broadcasting stuff. It's fun for me. Going back to what we talked about earlier, especially talking about like pro wrestling. If none of this ever pans out for anything, I'm still gonna chat up my buddies about wrestling and talk about it. So you know what I mean? I love it, whether it goes anywhere or not in life.
And you are a part of an elite group, in my opinion, of AfterBuzz TV. When it comes, because a lot of those individuals that are part of AfterBuzz TV have their own unique shows as well, including yours, along with Flowblow. And what I love is that I believe that AfterBuzz TV really creates not just broadcasters, but also stars. You look at Evan T. Mack, who's also in The Bump in WWE. You look at TK, who's absolutely killing it in women's wrestling talk. And just the fact that just the individuals that I've named and so many more that are coming from AfterBuzz TV. How does it feel to be a part of a company or an organization that just really sets the tone for really developing and making broadcasters start?
Oh man, well I appreciate getting lumped in with those guys. I don't know if they'd agree, but I'll take it. Yeah, I mean it's what I like about that, especially I'll use Evan as an example, who is just such an awesome. What you see on TV is who he is in real life, and when you talk to him. And I'll never forget the first day I met Evan. The thing about Evan is he's not just a huge personality, he's actually a huge person in general as well. And like I said, he is who you get when you talk to him. So I'll never forget when he walks in for the first time, you see this massive person, just loud and hilarious and funny. And it's actually kind of intimidating because you're like, geez, this person is a star. But what I love about that, and where I think AfterBuzz was great, is by finding these people who are so talented and so good at what they do and forcing you to sit next to them. It's kind of a sink or swim thing. And I use Evan as the example because he has so much energy and he's so entertaining and he's such a person to have on a show that it forces you to stop watching him do his show, and it forces you to be on the show, and it forces you to sort of fight your way in for time to speak and fight your way in for things to do, but not just for the sake of speaking, but to try to keep up with him. And that's what's fun about doing shows with him and the other people that are there. You know, TK is so connected and so good at getting interviews and knowing people and asking hard questions. And Flobo is just, I always say he's one of my favorite, like, I call it like lead host, where like whenever there's a panel and there's lots of information to dissect and break things down, he's so good at sort of being the point guard of the team there. So I love working with all those people, and the fact that I get lumped in with them makes me happy, because I'm one of those people that always feels like I'm just barely hanging on to the team. You know, I'm the guy that's going to get cut any minute, but they're the stars.
The Steve Blake of the situation.
Yeah, I'm like as long as I'm on the team, cool. But I don't know. In fact, even with AfterBuzz and Raw, I was on there for 6 months before I stopped asking every week if they wanted me to come back next week. You know, I'd always be like, "Do you want me to be back next week? Am I on the show again next week?" I'm like, "Yeah, Jack, you're on the show." I always thought of myself as like a fill-in or just a temp for like 6 months. But
that last-minute substitute going in for the last three-pointer to win the game, buzzer beater, makes it. That's what Jack Farmer is.
I'll take that any day of the week. That's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, but once again, you are a part, like going back to what we said about you being a part of AfterBuzz, it's just, again, just the names that have came out of AfterBuzz, even including Kathy Kelly, who was a part of AfterBuzz at one point in time. Just knowing that these broadcasters who have gone on to bigger things like WWE or in the UWN with Thunder Studios, or, you know, same thing goes with Johnny LaQuasso, who was a part of AfterBuzz TV as well. There's just so much. I feel like that, again, is a family that really gives you the key or that grip or that hand in need to really take you to where you need to go.
Yeah, and LaQuasso is a great example too. I never actually worked with him at AfterBuzz, but we had learned of each other and knew of each other, and I just coincidentally met him at UWN for the first time in person. And he is such a good guy and so helpful and so good about giving his experience and his time and advice and helping me to develop and grow, because he obviously is an amazing person in commentary and in interviewing roles and things like that, and just very gracious in giving his advice and helping me to develop there as well. I think AfterBuzz just has a good track record of getting people that kind of believe in a rising tide raises all ships kind of thing. And people like to help each other out and like to give each other opportunities and help each other in that way. And so I don't know if that's something that Kevin Undergaro and Maria Menounos like look for when they bring in hosts, or if that's just sort of what cultivated itself while it was there. But yeah, everyone there is very quick to help each other out. I think I could reach out to many of the former hosts and they'd be more than happy to lend a helping hand or give advice or feedback or whatever the case may be. Even Jim, who everyone calls a heel, if you watched him, he's actually one of the nicest people and one of the quickest to help you out if you ever need anything too. He always hates when I say that because I bust his gimmick of being the heel, but he's actually a super nice guy. Yeah, I mean he's real to himself. Like on camera, that's how he acts. But if you ever needed something, he'd be there for you.
When you're surrounded by so many people that have the same passion or have that kind of a little bit similar passion that you have for the business, it really makes your job, of course you have the process that comes with it, but it really makes that experience fun in a sense.
Yeah, and it's I think with shows too, it's always about trying to find a way to make it as entertaining as possible. And I think having people that understand that as well, like we love talking pro wrestling. It's very easy to get into the weeds and talk about things to try to sound smarter than everyone else. But I think knowing when it's time to be entertaining about it is what you need to do. And I think with the people I've been fortunate enough to work with, we're all pretty good at knowing when something's an entertaining topic and when to argue about it or when to, whatever the case may be. I work with Flobo a lot, so it's always fun to argue about the people that we like or don't like or whatever, and know that it's entertainment whether we agree or disagree.
Before I go on, I do have a sidebar question. You do talk about how much you have a passion for professional wrestling, and of course we do know that you have a post AEW Dynamite podcast, which you, again, for the second time, you guys could check out in the link in the description below. Yep. But I do have a hot take question for you, and that is every Tuesday, because we are recording on a Tuesday, every Tuesday night, of course, they have Impact Wrestling, but they also have AEW Dark, and a lot of critical reception in my end is that AEW Dark is just a show on YouTube that they show out that doesn't really get the great perception that it should have, because in my opinion, AEW Dark is truly something special. When you look at all the talent that comes from outside of AEW, when you look at the talent that's in the AEW roster that really doesn't necessarily get that airtime on Wednesday nights, it's truly something special to see. Like, oh, I didn't know who Mike Verna is. I don't know who Calvin Stewart. By the way, shout out to Calvin Stewart. I actually interviewed him. I don't know who Puff is. Like, just these names and individuals, especially a lot from the Southern California scene, like Danny Limelight, who's absolutely killing it consistently, came from, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Empire Wrestling Federation, just the Southern California wrestling promotions that the Southern California area knows, or just the California area knows in general, but not from the rest of the world. So just given that platform like AEW Dark to showcase all this talent is truly something special. So with this said, how do you feel about AEW?
I love AEW Dark. I think it is the hidden jewel of pro wrestling every week. It has so much great stuff on it if you're a wrestling fan. And so much stuff happens that matters on AEW Dynamite. For instance, I saw people tweeting recently, as of recording this, this week, the Acclaimed will be facing the Young Bucks for the titles. And people were like, how come they get a title shot? How come they get jumped to the front? And I had to respond, they're on an 8-match win streak. What do you mean, how come they're jumping to the front? That's where stuff like that happens. Guys like Will Hobbs, if you've been watching AEW, you knew as soon as he showed up on Dynamite that he was going to be a big factor. You knew he was great. And I said last month, I'm going to say it again, if you could buy stock in a wrestler right now, you better buy as much stock as you can in Danny Limelight, because he is going to have such a good year. I mean, he's already closing out 2020 on such a plus right now, but he has been absolutely killing it on AEW Dark. And as of recording this, I know he has Rey Fenix tonight, which is going to be the match of the night. I cannot wait to see it. I think it's appointment viewing. People need to see it. Danny Limelight will be like I said, if you could buy stocks in wrestlers right now, you need to pick. This is like, he's like Amazon in the early days. He's going to be a star.
And what I love about Danny Limelight too, since we're on the topic, is the fact that his offense, of course, is people could say like a typical cruiserweight, but the way he moves in the ring, the way you've seen his promo work in the independent scene, his character, his passion for this business is truly unique. And I do agree with you when you say that he is truly something that's going to be huge in the professional wrestling business.
Yeah, he's gonna be one of those guys that he's gonna blow up, and everyone's gonna go, "Where has this guy been hiding?" And you and I will say, "Well, he's been on United Wrestling Network. He's been on Championship Wrestling. He's been on AEW Dark. This is where he's been all this time." But he's so good. He was one of the first people I got the opportunity to interview at United Wrestling Network, and man, he is so good. Even just, I feel fortunate that he let me be there, because I mean, he could cut a promo with or without someone holding a microphone, but just super entertaining and super great on. He's not missing anything. If you're checking boxes on skill sets, he's not missing anything. That's why I think he'll be great once he gets up and running in 2021. I think that's going to be his year. He's going to be a breakout star, if not already. I mean, he's had matches with Brian Cage and Ray Phoenix in AEW. What more can we ask for from the guy? He's a tag team champion right now in Championship Wrestling. I mean, come on. 2021 is going to be a huge year for him.
Truly the perfect package going into 2021. But people also forget that when it comes to AEW's new assignees, you look at Powerhouse Hobbs, or Will Hobbs, who came from the Northern California wrestling scene. He also, there's also, Brian Cage, of course, known for the California wrestling scene as well. I'm trying to think of everybody right now. Oh, yes. You're also talking about... oh my goodness, Thunder Rosa, I believe, was a part of that California wrestling scene as well. Of
course, SCU.
SCU, of course, Scorpio Sky, Frankie Kazarian, Christopher Daniels. There's so much coming from California, and especially now with breakout stars in the California wrestling scene, like an Andy Brown. There's so much out there that I feel so confident knowing that the independent wrestling scene, as we know it right now, despite a pandemic, it's going to get huger in years to come.
Yeah, I feel like the California wrestling scene, the West Coast wrestling scene in general, doesn't get enough love for the contribution it makes. There's so many other places, Canada gets a lot of love, and it seems like different places in the South and Texas get a lot of love. And look, it's deserved. There's a lot of people coming from those places, but man, the West Coast, we've got a lot of great wrestling around here, and whether it's here in Southern California, up in the Pacific Northwest with Defy Wrestling, lots of great stuff coming on the West Coast. And you're right, I think maybe 2021 and 2022 is going to be the years that maybe people start to notice that this is where a lot of the good wrestlers come through.
And it also feels like that 2021 and 2022 are also going to be the years that people are actually going to do research and actually look these guys up and see all these promotions that they have came from.
Well, that's what's really great about this time in wrestling, and kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with what you can record a show on a cell phone or whatever the case may be, is it gives so much power to these other companies to broadcast shows and get their show out there, as opposed to, we can romanticize like the Attitude Era as much as we want, but if you didn't have a broadcast studio helping you out, no one was going to see your show. Where now you can have a small independent show, put it up on YouTube, and the world can see what you're doing, and they can follow what you're doing, and they can fall in love with the different stars. And I think that's such a powerful tool that wrestling companies are going to have going forward. And it will be interesting to see how and if bigger companies pivot to compete with that, because I think a lot of people like with pro wrestling. I think one of the great things that's fun about pro wrestling, especially for people who've watched it for a long time, is finding these young stars that are just starting and following their career. And so I think there's gonna be a lot of people that like tuning into these smaller companies and seeing what they can do. Because I mean, you look at the production values too, and these, quote unquote smaller companies, they're doing some pretty good stuff with what they have. It's no longer just cheap crummy, rundown looking places. I mean, some of them don't have the production value still, but like there's so many great wrestling companies that if it weren't for the fact that it's easier to get your stuff out there now, a lot of us wouldn't be talking about, but we are. And I think that's great for everybody.
It's great for everybody, and it's also great for when we talked about smaller wrestling companies getting that recognition. And I do want to talk about this one wrestling company that's at this one place called Thunder Studios in Long Beach, California, called Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, also known as the United Wrestling Network, also known at one point in time as Primetime Live, and as far as my knowledge goes, NWA Shockwave. So with all this said, where was the start for you, Jack Farmer, when it came to working with the United Wrestling Network?
So, so I've always wanted to work in wrestling. So with all the podcasts and all the after shows and things like that, I've always wanted to be like on the other side of it. I've always wanted to be on the wrestling company side of it. I love promoting things. I love building up to things. I love being a part of that kind of stuff. It just never seemed accessible to me before. And then it was just, like I said, I was DJing, and then suddenly I'm on Afterbuzz, and suddenly I'm doing these shows, and suddenly I'm getting closer and closer, as you're probably feeling, you get closer and closer to that side of things. I don't know if you want to be within a wrestling company or stay outside of the wrestling companies, but you probably feel that you're getting closer and closer to, if you wanted to jump from one to the other, you could. But I was getting closer, and it sounds silly, but I just reached out to David Marquez of all places on LinkedIn. No one gives LinkedIn its credit. LinkedIn is a treasure trove, I tell you. But I reached out on LinkedIn, and he was kind enough to get back to me. And I was just like, hey man, I can't remember the exact thing, but it was just like, if there's anything I can do to be helpful, let me know. And I don't know if it was just the right timing. I don't know if it was just luck, or I don't know if it was the fact that I had the opportunity to build a resume through Afterbuzz and all these other projects, that kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, from doing it for so long. And even though I didn't have a lot of views, maybe that was when he was able to look back and go, oh, Jack's been doing this. And whatever the case is, he just said, come on by Thunder Studios one day. And so I came by and I hung out and I kind of saw how things work. And then, I mean, again, going back to how I was with Afterbuzz, I was like, hey, do you want me to come back next week? And he said, yeah, why don't you come back and we'll have you interview for the role of backstage interviewer. And I was like, awesome, that sounds great. And so I did. And I got the chance to do some interviews, and I started, I believe it was episode 10 is when I first got TV time, as they say. And that's when I got to interview Danny Limelight in the bodega, and they gave me some grief. They messed with me a little bit, but it was still fun. You know, I got to talk to Rhea Rosas. I got to talk to all sorts of people. Man, it's so fun, and it's so interesting seeing it from the other side and the work that goes into it. And I'm so blown away by the other side of things there. And it's everyone there has been amazing. David Marquez is just an absolute wealth of knowledge, and so open to sharing it. And so just getting to kind of learn from him has really been a delight that I never expected in my life I'd get the opportunity to have.
And it's funny that you say that, because I spoke to, as mentioned before, Johnny LaQuasto and Alyssa Marino, and of course also just recently as well, make sure you guys go check that out as well, Blake Bulletproof Troop. And they were also just talking about the atmosphere of Thunder Studios and Primetime Live, and just seeing the friendly atmosphere, the helpful atmosphere, whether that's Dave Marquez, whether that's the talent in the ring, outside talent, production crew, they're always there to support you and really help you, again, get to where you need to go. But not only that, but also to really push you forward, to help you step up a notch, to really push you to places that you have never thought that you could be pushed to, and really succeed.
Yeah, and it was a really great experience for me, in especially coming from DJ world, where DJs can sometimes be very secretive and very standoffish. You know, there's actually modes you can put on your DJ equipment so that people can't see what songs you're playing and things like that. So no one can even like sneak up behind you and see what you're doing. They're very secretive. And so getting to go to a place like United Wrestling Network and chat with the people there, and then being just open books and wanting to help people grow. Like Alyssa, like I had the opportunity to chat with her and just like, hey, how do you approach commentary? What do you do to get ready for each show? What do you do to prepare yourself? And just an open book. Like, this is what I do. This is kind of how I get through the day. This is who I talk to. This is how I get prepped. TK, James Kincaid, Bulletproof, all of them. Like, they're just such great, easy people to chat to, and they want to help you out. And they're all, like I said, it's crazy how friendly everyone is and how open everyone is. It was a little, I'll be honest, it was a little nerve-wracking because there's this part of me too, like they're this well-oiled machine and you don't want to be the person that's getting in their way while they're trying to get their work done, but you want to ask them a million questions. But they were all just incredibly gracious with their time, and I have nothing negative to say about anyone there. They were all, every person I interacted with was just amazing.
And that friendly atmosphere, once again, really helps you push forward. And speaking about pushing forward, I am curious, though. Jack Farmer has done a lot in 2020, despite a pandemic, when he has the podcast, Afterbuzz TV. He also has Thunder Studios when he does UWN, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Primetime Live, or whatever the case may be. What's the goal for 2021 and in the future in general? Because a lot of the times when they say, "Oh, what's the goal for next year?" they're like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna sign for AEW. I'm gonna sign for Impact Wrestling. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that." But in reality, we really have to kind of take a step back and really kind of think before saying that. So I'm just curious, what is the goal for 2021 for Jack Farmer?
Well, don't get me wrong. I would love to sign a massive $1 million contract next year. But honestly, right now, going back to what I said, I want to get invited back when the shows get going again. That's what I want. I want to get invited back. I'm hoping to get a bigger role within United Wrestling Network, whether it be doing more interviews, whether it be doing some kind of commentary or interview show or something along those lines. Anything I can do to be more involved in the actual show. I'm a ham. I want to be on TV. I want to do more stuff. Give me the chance. Let me see that little red light on the camera. But basically, just get more and more involved in that. And any of the podcast stuff, obviously, I'd love to see that grow, get more numbers there. But I think that one of the reasons I like that quote you said earlier is I'm really a process guy. I like doing what I'm doing. So I hope I get the opportunity to keep on making these shows and keep on doing this stuff, and maybe add back in doing the shows and DJing events and doing this stuff. I'm really bad at saying no to things. I like doing everything.
There is not a problem at all for keeping multiple passions with you and just doing them, because as long as you love to do them, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer too, is you never know where things are going to take you or how they're going to play out. As I said, one of the things that sort of got me to the dance with being a backstage interviewer at Primetime Live is DJing in a weird roundabout way. And when I started at a warehouse, I never thought that, oh, this will be my into pro wrestling. But because you keep things open and you keep your eyes open, you keep opportunities available, and you just keep working, different things open up. So I feel like I'm getting to live a dream every time I'm backstage there. Every time I'm at Thunder Studios, I feel like, even when I'm doing Afterbuzz or when I'm doing one of the podcasts, I feel like I'm living a dream. And something that Steve Kaufman said to me, Steve Kaufman, also from Afterbuzz, does After 83 Weeks with Christy Olsen, who was also on NXT and talks to Eric Bischoff all the time. And he runs a bunch of YouTube pages for a ton of different massive wrestling legends. I was talking to him once, and he's like, hey, you got to make your 13-year-old self happy. And that always sticks out to me as something. I don't know if that's his quote or if he took it from someone, but I heard it from him, so I'm giving him the credit. You have to make 13-year-old you happy. And I feel like that's been sort of the message for me, especially this past year, is just, how do I make 13-year-old Jack happy? And I've been fortunate that I've been able to do a lot of things that I think would make 13-year-old Jack pretty excited.
And what's interesting about that quote that you said, make your 13-year-old self happy. For me, making my 13-year-old self happy is the same thing as making my 10-year-old self happy, because I've wanted the same career. I've had the same passion for 10 plus years now of being that broadcaster, of being in front of that camera, talking sports. Vince Scully, world famous broadcaster, Vince Scully for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Well, started with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And just seeing him do what he did at a Dodger game against the San Francisco Giants on KCAL 9, I think it was at the time. I don't think Sports in LA had just gone on yet, but I could be wrong. So fact checkers, if you're out there, I do apologize. Yeah. So just seeing him tell a story and to present himself on camera ignited that fire and inspired me to say, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
There's nothing quite like seeing someone do something that you appreciate and do it so well, and seeing the nuances of what they do and really seeing a master at work. Vince Scully, easily one of the greatest. He's so good as a commentator and as a broadcaster. Is he your guy? Is he your top?
Absolutely. He's the top one. Of course, sports fans, sports reporters who are, want to go into that field will say, oh, well, I think that Joe Miller was the greatest, and he was a part of the Los Angeles Kings, and there's a helicopter in the background, but that doesn't matter. So, just the fact that he did this and he did that better. But Vince Scully, to me, he's my guy because he was the perfect embodiment in my eye of view of the way that he dressed, the way he addressed the camera, the way he addressed the microphone for those who were not watching the game on television. If it was on the radio, he made it seem like he was your neighbor. He made it seem like he was going to stop by. He's like, hey, neighbor, so did you know that the Los Angeles Dodgers are on a 10-game winning streak, and they're in the Freeway Series against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, and this is the biggest game of the year, and Mike Trout is going to be playing with an injury, and Clayton Kershaw is going to be on the mound, and then Kenley Jansen is questioned to be on the on the closing pitcher side. It's just the statistics doesn't seem too complicated to the average viewer, according to him. He makes it like this. Of course, you could have a million statistics. You could have a million stuff on this one player about how they're playing on the game the year on the same day that the Dodgers won the 1988 World Series, and just the history that he puts upon a game or on a player really just pops out, and it makes me appreciate and love what I want to do, whether that's through professional wrestling, basketball, baseball, football, or other sports like mixed martial arts or whatever the case may be. It makes me appreciate the career, and it makes me appreciate the passion that when I look at other people like a Jack Farmer, like an Alyssa Marino, like a Blake Bulletproof Troop, Jim Ross, Jerry the King Lawler, Joey Styles, Taz, Excalibur, just all these others, and even people like Doris Burke, who's killing it on the NBA, WNBA scene. There's so much that I appreciate about the career choice and the passion that I do have, that every time I go back and look at something like that, it just makes me go back and, like you mentioned about the kid in the candy store kind of feel, just like, wow, I really want to do this. Like, I'm so glad I'm doing this.
It's funny. I look back at, you're absolutely right about everything with everything you just said. With Vince Scully too, it's something I like to add, that you can tell how great a broadcaster is, or anyone is, when people who are fans of the other teams also agree that that's the guy. It doesn't matter if you're a fan of, you could be an Astros fan, but yeah, Vince Scully's the guy. He's, when the diehard fans are also like, yeah, but Vince Scully's the guy. He's the one. Then I think that really means something, because in sports, sometimes it becomes hard for us to objectively look at other teams versus our own, like I'm a Seattle sports fan. So like the Seahawks, I'm that guy every year. I'm like, well, this is their year. They could win the whole thing. It's hard for me to objectively look at them and be like, well, maybe not this year. And I think everything about them is great all the time. And so, same thing like the Mariners. So as a Mariners fan, it's hard for me to when I still go, yeah, but Vince Scully's the guy. It means you've really transcended something there.
And what I don't get me wrong too, Seattle has had its great moments as well. I mean, of course, when you look at the Mariners, you also have the world famous. Well, I don't know. I don't know in today's time if you could call him that, but Ichiro.
Yeah.
You know, definitely one of the greatest. But again, I don't know how current culture is. What we have views on Ichiro. Same thing goes with the Seattle Seahawks and the way that Russell Wilson really carried that team, especially giving them a Super Bowl win. So it's just appreciating moments like that, even though it's not, of course, we're biased because, of course, Los Angeles, you know, Dodgers and Lakers winning the 2020 championships this year, which was surprisingly, it took almost over 30 years for it. But besides the fact,
no pressure on the Rams, by the way. Like every other LA team seems to be winning. Rams. What are you gonna?
I am not the best of football fans. Fans.
It's it was interesting this year with the back-to-back wins of the Lakers and the Dodgers. Being someone who wasn't originally from LA, I live here now. It was very interesting to see the comparison of the celebrations, if that makes sense. I always thought this was a Lakers town, but boy, oh boy, it is a Dodgers town. The celebration for the Dodgers way bigger than the celebration for the Lakers. No offense, LeBron, but this town showed up for the Dodgers.
If there's anything LA is known for, and I live in the suburbs of Los Angeles, known as San Bernardino, which is about an hour or two from there, but that's beside the point. It's always, you know, when it comes to Los Angeles, it's always a baseball city and it's also a basketball city because LA loves their Lakers and they also love their Dodgers. Of course, they have a hockey team, but I mean, who's paying attention? Anyway. So I try
to get into hockey, but it never sticks for me.
That sounded like a pun.
It does. I didn't mean it to, but it never, like, I'll get into it for a little bit. I think it's hard to get into a sport, like, after a certain age. Like, it's hard to get into a new sport. You know what I mean? Like, I try to, but I feel like, I'm just saying I'm into it. I'm not really as into it as, like, the stuff you grow up with, you know? Because I didn't really grow up with hockey.
And speaking from a sports fan's perspective, excuse me, coming from Seattle, you're probably going to know what question I'm going to ask with this one. And I'm talking about the Seattle Supersonics. Were you a diehard fan of the team? And if so, how did you feel about the departure from Seattle all the way to Oklahoma?
It was gut wrenching. I'll be honest. That hurt. Like, my dad too was like a diehard Sonics fan, and we still have Sonics like memorabilia up in my parents' house. He was a fan from day one of theirs and like watched every single game, loved them. And so it definitely broke his heart when they left, and it broke my heart as well, but also just to see my dad's heart get broken that way, which is always it's like a tough thing to see your dad get his heart broken, you know? And it was so sad the way it all happened. We could all kind of see it coming like 2 years out, you know, which was like just gut wrenching. So that was a real bummer. And I think it still surprises me Seattle doesn't have a team because they want one so bad. And it feels like every team that's there financially does very well. They always sell out tickets. They always sell lots of merchandise. I don't know. It feels like it's just bad business to not have a team there, but what do I know? Yeah, it broke my heart. I'm still hoping they get a team back. I was actually looking on Cameo just yesterday to see about getting a cameo for my dad from one of the players, but Gary Payton's $700. I love you, Gary, but I love you, Gary, but not $700 worth.
That's truly a glove steal of a deal.
I feel like sometimes I was thinking, man, he just put $700. He wants to flex that he's expensive. That's what he's doing. But I would love to get my dad a Gary Payton cameo, but I can't spend $700 on that. Come on, in this economy, that's my whole stimulus check.
Yeah, a whole stimulus check and a whole cameo from Cody Rhodes and Fuego del Sol, which is $999 for those who don't know.
It bummed me out. I did get the opportunity because the team lost a lot of support in those last years. So I remember I went to see them play play against some. I think it was the Jazz. It was like a really bad team that year, and the Sonics were really bad that year. And I went there, and because everyone knew the team was leaving and it was a bad team, like a lot of the seats were empty. And so me and my buddy, we kept moving down closer and closer, and no one would stop us. And we got literally to the very, very front row. So I got to have my feet on the hardwood for a game. And I thought that was kind of a cool experience. But it was also a bummer because we got Kevin Durant right at the end. And so it was like, oh man, like, come on. Like this is, but yeah, it's a bummer, but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, they could have also taken the Charlotte route. They could have had the Charlotte Bobcats or something similar to a team name, and then eventually, about 7 to 10 years later, they would actually get the name back.
Yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, I'm happy for Oklahoma having a team, but I'm bummed it's my team. You know, now I'm very much an anti-Oklahoma Thunder person. I want them to have nothing but failure in their games. I'm always rooting against them. Because it's like the X, you know?
That annoying X that never goes away.
That never goes away. And you're like, man, I hope you don't do I'm bitter. I want him to do bad. That's
Well, speaking about the bitter X, I am curious. Do you think that the good comparison between the duo of Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook can be made? Same thing goes with Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp.
I mean, I get where it's coming from. I feel like it's hard to compare that because Shawn Kemp was just such a nasty dunker. His dunks were just so dirty. I don't know if you can compare anyone to him. So I'm a little biased because that's like my childhood. So I say there's no one can compare to the Glove and the Rain Man. But sure, I don't know, why not? But man, like if for anyone who hasn't seen some of those Shawn Kemp dunks, go look up on YouTube and type in Shawn Kemp dunks, and you will be treated to some just gnarly dunks. He was so good. I love watching him dunk on people. I was a Shawn Kemp fan over Gary Payton as a kid. Now as an adult, I'm like, oh well, Gary Payton was the guy. But as a kid, I like Shawn Kemp because he would just crush people with super dunks.
Yeah, and so once again, Jack, I do want to thank you so much for being on this new rebrand of All Heart, All Soul. I can't believe I just messed up my own name, but you know what? That doesn't matter because I do appreciate the passionate conversation that you have as a passionate individual yourself.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on the first version of the new name show. I appreciate it. I hope it was worth it for your listeners and viewers. I hope they had a good time.
So before we go, I do have one final question, and this is kind of the typical question of if you could do this, if you could do that. If there's anybody in the commentary game, whether, you know, and of course, sadly, they have to be alive still, that you would love to work with in terms of commentary, whether that's through Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, United Wrestling Network, or any company in general, who would be that commentary team that you would love to work aside from and why?
So, I guess my two answers. I have two answers. I'm gonna cheat if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries.
My favorite current commentator going right now, if we can count him as going right now, is Morrow. I think Morrow just has energy and fire, and I love listening to him on the call. I think he's just. I love his passion. I love his energy. He sounds like he's so into it whenever he's into it. Is Mamma Mia! It's always great. I love him on any show, and I think he brings a lot to any show he's on. Going back to what I said though, making 13-year-old me happy. I'd like to work with Tony Schiavone. I was a WCW guy, and so throughout the late '90s, him on the commentary team. For WCW, I think it'd be fun to work with him. I'm a fan of his. I like his style. And I know a lot of people probably say growing up they want to work with JR. JR is great too. I'd be happy there. We're splitting hairs. I'd like to work with any of them. But I think Tony Schiavone for the kid in me. But I think the standard bearer for me right now, even though he's not technically on a commentary team at the moment, is Morrow.
I mean, for me, of course, Morrow definitely is up there, especially he's relatable on so many levels. I can't count out my guy Excalibur. I can't count out people like Veda Scott, who really have a true, unique gift to the commentary game. Same thing goes with Alyssa Marino, Johnny LaQuasto, Blake Brill-Approved Troop, Todd Kinley even.
Yes.
Like, I'm trying to name everybody right now. Jim Ross, of course. Michael.
Michael Cole is one of those guys that's going to get a lot of love after he retires. I think he's going to be similar to like John Cena, how everyone hated John Cena until he stepped away, and now everyone's like, oh my God, how can they replace John Cena? He was so great. I think that's going to be like Michael Cole. I think sometimes he gets grief because we're spoiled, but then once he leaves, it's going to be like there's going to be a void when he leaves. Oh
yeah, you're definitely going to see that love that originally was from.
Yes, he's one of those guys. I feel old when I think about Michael Cole because I always think like, you know, again, maybe I'm of a certain age and I'm like, yeah, you know, I always think of like Jim Ross is like the commentary guy. But then when you start to do the math, you're like, no, Michael Cole's been there for like 2 decades. He's the voice of WWE at this point. But yeah, anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt. But his quick knowledge of every wrestling move ever, it seems like, and the proper way to pronounce it and where it's from, and his just understanding of everything is insane.
Well, that terminology that he has for every wrestling move, when you, again, as a personal fan of Dark, sorry guys, just to see him give out this information of all these independent wrestlers that come in, or just the main roster in general, it's so great how he just puts that story into perspective.
Yeah, and it gives he puts history on it, which is always great to see. And so it's he does a lot of little things, like it's not just someone doing a move, but he'll like mention about how where they started doing that move and those things that adds a little bit more to it. So I agree. I think Excalibur is great. All the people you mentioned are great. I think TK, as you mentioned, is one of those guys that I think doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for how much he's done, how long he's been in the game, how long he's done it, and how well he's done it for so many places.
Yeah, and one person I actually forgot to mention as well, because he just pops up in the brain, also doing AEW Dark, which you guys should check out every Tuesday. I'm not being paid to do that, by the way. Is Anthony Ogogo.
Yes.
MMA fighter or boxer, whichever you would like to refer to him as. He really brings a lot of good flavor to that commentary table. Yeah,
he blew me away. I was actually kind of jealous of, like, you know, because he's like an MMA fighter, and you know, when I first saw him on commentary, I was like, oh, okay, they're just gonna kind of trot him out here to do something, and then he killed it, and I was like, how dare you just show up and be really good at this job? But no, I was jealous in a good way. I was like, man, that's so cool. He kills it. He's really good on commentary.
Yeah, and you can really see kind of like that Blake Bulletproof Troop style, where the competition background and giving that perspective as a competition wrestler or boxer or MMA fighter really applies to the way he tells that story.
Yeah, and speaking of Blake, yeah, he's great too. He's one of those guys that, because he's such a tough person, when he says, oh, he's really cranking on that headlock or whatever the case may be, you're like, man, if Blake's saying it, it must be really tough. Blake is one of those guys that is just so legitimately tough and so intimidating. He's an intimidating guy. He's like he's been nothing but nice and gracious to me. But if he ever wanted to intimidate me, he could just give me a look, and I'd be like, I'm done. You win. I'm out. Yeah, he's. I agree. I get what you're saying. He's one of those people that just adds such a. When he says something looks like it hurts, you're like, yeah, it must have really hurt.
Yeah. So once again, Jack, I do want to thank you so much. For those who don't know, you can follow The Real Jack Farmer on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you can find him. Just search up Jack Farmer, and basically you can find him anywhere. So you can also subscribe to his podcast, subscribe to all the content that he has been doing during a time where, of course, millions of people are doing the same thing, but he's doing it better than the rest. So once again, thank you so much for joining Jack on this new rebrand, and hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it, and thanks to everyone who listened.
All right, and until we meet again, guys, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. And you know what? I'm gonna have this on an audio format now, so this is gonna be you can find this on an audio format near you: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor. That's mostly where I'm gonna be getting this from, and that's where you're gonna be finding this. So make sure you guys go do that, subscribe, and I'm bad at outros, so there you go.